Of all things, it turns out the biggest point of contention for the fans of the Game of Thrones prequel is the pitiful lighting in the show's latest episode. As the show continued to release over the past several weeks, viewers have been drawn back into the Game of Thrones universe, rekindling the hype that died down after the poor reception to Game of Thrones Season 8. Keep watching as we delve deeper into the GOT universe. First up, the background. House of the Dragon follows the Targaryen family and their rule over the Seven Kingdoms 157 years before Daenerys Targaryen is born. The show follows Rhaenyra, the newly appointed Targaryen heir, as she grows up and is forced to take on the responsibilities of an heir to the Iron Throne. All of this happens while she has to show power as a woman in her patriarchal society. House of the Dragon's time jumps make the plot fast-paced, and the intense drama that fans have enjoyed throughout the series constantly reveals more Targaryen family lore. So, the poor lighting and the reaction on Twitter. The dimly lit scenes make it hard for many to see what is happening. That's the long and the short of it. The show has been roasted in threads of memes on social media, with viewers making jokes about the show's lighting budget and lighting designer. Poorly lit scenes are not unique to House of the Dragon, though. Game of Thrones also had poorly lit scenes that made viewing difficult. The producers of Game of Thrones say that the dim lighting is to make the show feel more natural. Fans over the years have lamented their inability to see what is going on. Most notably, the Game of Thrones Season 8 episode, The Long Night, includes an extended battle sequence shrouded in darkness. The scene was similarly mocked by fans online after it aired. Despite these complaints, nothing has been changed, with the lighting in the most recent episode of the prequel series being just as poor as in some of the Game of Thrones episodes. The issue brings disagreeing fans together as a united voice. Stay with us for more. Also, lots of disagreements between fans, but poor lighting is common ground. Fans often disagree over different elements of the Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon series, but the one thing that they have been able to find common ground on is the poor lighting. The cinematography of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon seems to be pretty consistent, but it does seem like the show's lighting is stuck in a dimly lit rut. Bear with it now and joke about it later. That's our only advice. Then, Game of Thrones fans relive the Red Wedding horror. Fans are debating which shockingly graphic scene was more upsetting, Game of Thrones' Red Wedding or the House of the Dragon's birthing scene. Game of Thrones is famous for killing off main characters in shocking fashion, beginning with Ned Stark's, Sean Bean, death by execution in Scene 1's penultimate episode. Season 3's penultimate episode, The Reigns of Castamere, depicted one of the most notorious bloodbaths in television history, as Robb Stark, his mother Catelyn, and his pregnant wife Talisa, along with all his followers, are massacred by Walder Frey for violating a marriage pact. Premiered earlier this month on HBO, the Game of Thrones prequel series House of the Dragon immediately shocked audiences with a level of violence comparable to its predecessor. In Episode 1, Queen Aemma begins to experience complications during childbirth, and King Viserys, desperate to secure a male heir, orders a cesarean section to be performed on his wife without her consent while she is fully conscious. The incredibly graphic birthing scene garnered criticism, since House of the Dragon opted not to include a content warning before the episode. But was it worse? Stay with us as we find out what fans think, and that sparked debate. Now fans have begun debating which scene was more impactful. The debate was started by a tweet from Winter is Coming, which asked the question, which was more upsetting, the Red Wedding from Game of Thrones or Aemma Arryn's birthing scene from House of the Dragon? Based on those responding to the inquiry, fans seem to be in near universal agreement that Game of Thrones' Red Wedding was the more upsetting moment. The massacre was not only jaw-dropping because it killed off two of the show's main characters, but because of the shockingly violent manner in which it happened, as Talisa's pregnant womb is stabbed repeatedly and Catelyn's throat is slit. Not to mention that Walder Frey's actions violate the ancient and sacred tradition in Westeros known as guest rights, which prevents hosts from harming guests during their stay, lest a curse be placed upon their house. Some fans are claiming the two scenes are apples and oranges, and therefore should not be compared. By the time the Red Wedding occurs in Game of Thrones, audiences had already gotten to know Robb and Cat throughout 3 seasons. On the other hand, audiences had only known Aemma for a few scenes before her death in House of the Dragon, which certainly makes it less impactful. Both scenes are masterfully done, so it's hard to go wrong with either one. Fans have also been discussing the Kingsguard and Jaime Lannister. Keep watching as we show you why. Then, House of the Dragon secretly insults Jaime Lannister's Kingsguard. House of the Dragon saw Rhaenyra choosing a new knight to join the Kingsguard, but the series unintentionally threw Jaime's Kingsguard under the bus. Warning, this part of the video contains spoilers for House of the Dragon Season 1 Episode 2. House of the Dragon has secretly insulted Jaime Lannister's Kingsguard. The Kingsguard played a pivotal role in Game of Thrones. Historically, they've been tasked with the highest order, to protect the Iron Throne and the royal family against any threats. It's considered an honor to serve on the Kingsguard, though House of the Dragon, set 200 years before the events of Game of Thrones, quietly foreshadows Jaime's time in its service. So let's start with a backward glance. Jaime served in the Kingsguard for several years and, for the majority of his time in service, did his civic duty protecting King Robert Baratheon. He would eventually become the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, but the more time passed, the more the Kingsguard lost its shine. House of the Dragon Season 1 Episode 2 saw Rhaenyra Targaryen tasked with choosing new members of the Kingsguard. With Sir Ryam Redwyn, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, dead, Sir Harold Westerling has taken his place in the position. While Sir Ryam Redwyn's reputation was that of a spectacular knight, a man with so much honor, battle experience, and strength that no one could live up to him, House of the Dragon's choices for potential new members were not considered good enough to join at all. Tourney knights, according to Rhaenyra, were not fit to guard the king because of a lack of experience in actual battle. One brilliant storytelling tool employed throughout the GOT franchise is forward glances without being obvious. We're about to bring you a prime example. Keep watching to the end, and this could be the ultimate foreshadowing. The idea that no one was good enough to join the Kingsguard and that only tourney knights and inexperienced men were being put forth ultimately foreshadowed the downfall of the Kingsguard in Game of Thrones, which had more than its fair share of problems. In George R.R. Martin's books, Jaime ponders how the Kingsguard have fallen so low. What's more, he chastises himself for not doing anything to prevent certain types of men from joining the Kingsguard. Considering that many of the men who served with Jaime were considered vermin in his eyes, House of the Dragon is a blow to Jaime's time in the Kingsguard because it confirms that anyone who is not skilled in battle is therefore inferior. The Game of Thrones prequel suggests men who don't meet specific criteria aren't fit to defend the king or even stand by his side. Such men are what defined Jaime's time as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Being a tourney knight or a soldier who has not seen war was not good or honorable enough. If only Sir Ryam Redwyn and even Rhaenyra could see how far the Kingsguard had fallen, they might be appalled. In their eyes, Jaime's Kingsguard would likely have been seen as a complete failure, a mockery of the values House of the Dragon's Kingsguard seemingly upholds. Finally, why the Kingsguard changed so much by the time Jaime Lannister became Lord Commander. A Dance of the Dragons, George R.R. Martin's fifth novel, splits the realm between those who followed Rhaenyra and those who believed Aegon II Targaryen to be the rightful king. It was one of the first major events to divide the Kingsguard in their duties. Robert's rebellion in later years heavily diminished their ranks and also changed who could serve, especially as Baratheon's men killed the majority of Aerys's Kingsguard, who were considered some of the most skilled in battle. The Kingsguard saw further degradation when Jaime murdered Aerys, the king he was meant to protect and serve. So, while Jaime may be disgusted by the men who later joined the Kingsguard under Lannister rule, he also set a precedent for their inclusion in the ranks. To end this video, it is brilliant that the intrigue and backstories in the GOT franchise remain so relevant, and there is more on the horizon. Remember to look for our future videos to stay up to speed.